gets it, spins away, baseline shot. Shea puts it in and walks it off in OKC. Giddey keeps it himself and takes it up as he glides with the finger
roll. What is up, Thunder fans, and welcome to the Uncontested Postgame Podcast Edition. I'm your host for tonight, Tayler Peterson. You can find me on Twitter and all socials at Tayler_P15. You can find us at the _uncontested on Twitter, all social media. So I'll go ahead and just plug the social medias. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, you name it. We're pretty much there. You can also find us anywhere you listen to your podcast, any of the platforms you listen to. We be found there as well. And also be sure to go to our YouTube channel. We do these after every single game. We do a post-game podcast as well as a group podcast on Sunday evenings where we all go live. And we're trying to get a little more content to be putting on the YouTube and TikTok as well. So be sure to follow us. If you wouldn't mind, go and leave us a 5-star rating. That helps us tremendously. Speaking of ratings and subscriptions and things, if you go subscribe to YouTube, we'd really appreciate it. We're getting closer and closer to I guess, 1,000, or what am I looking for? I don't know. Anyways, it is late. It's late. I think that's enough housekeeping for this one. It's late here in OKC. It's about 11:45 Central Time after the Thunder, unfortunately, lose their first game of the West Coast road trip to the Golden State Warriors, 141-114. And it was just an absolute butt beating. I was about to say that the score looks a little worse than it seems because there were players that don't typically get playing time playing there at the majority of the fourth quarter, with this being the first night of a back-to-back. But honestly, it was just about as bad as it seems. And we'll get into that. Believe it or not, there is quite a bit to break down here. Excited to get to do that. I actually had the Warriors post game, a week ago from today, Monday, when the Thunder played the Warriors in OKC. And while it was the same outcome, a Thunder loss, it was still much more entertaining and very different vibe to the game, where the Thunder came out slow and sluggish, but ended up finishing really strong. This is the exact opposite, which we'll get into. So without further ado, first of all, thank you all in the chat. After a game like tonight, even as late as it is, y'all are still in here. We greatly appreciate it. So continue to drop your comments and questions, and I'll be sure to get to them. Trade deadline, whatever it may be, we can get to them here at the end. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and dive into this one. Big takeaways. What did OKC ever do to hurt Klay Thompson? I mean, that man scorches us every single time he plays us, it seems like. And he always just has career nights against us. Some of his best games of his career have come against OKC, and tonight was no different. Just absolutely insane. What did OKC do to him? Did they pass on him in a draft I don't know about? I don't know. It's interesting. The 3-point discrepancy in general wasn't just Klay Thompson. Obviously, that was a huge contributor and huge factor. But the 3-point discrepancy has been a theme playing against the Warriors that we've seen both a week ago from today and tonight's game. Aggressive Tre Mann, one of the very, very few bright spots from tonight's game. Thought Tre came out super aggressive, super confident, and it showed. And that was really great to see from a player like Tre, who ended up getting the uncontested player of the game for me tonight, because I thought he played really well. Wasn't his most efficient game that we've seen from him, but the aggression is what was so impressive, and it earned him playing time from Dayton. They're really throughout the majority of the game, rather than a guy like Isaiah Joe or some of the other options that were available for Mark tonight. And next one was the defensive significance of Lu Dort. We've seen here over the past handful of games just how impactful Lu Dort is defensively, and we'll kind of get into that and how that kind of ties in with two of those points I mentioned above earlier. And then finally, Aaron Wiggins, one other bright spot in this game. I thought Aaron Wiggins had another really good game. He continues to really impress with the time that he's given, regardless of the game, regardless of the opponent. Another really good Aaron Wiggins game. So let's see, just quickly before we get to the game breakdown. Eamon says Klay makes a living out of ruining our night. Top 2 Thunder killer, and he ain't 2. Yep, I agree completely. And then no days off DFS. I don't know what we did to Klay, but I swear he always goes off versus us. He hates the Thunder for some reason. So yeah, it's not just me. I was seeing all that on Twitter as well. It's It's definitely interesting. So we'll go ahead and get into it. Some pregame notes. This is the Thunder's first game of a West Coast road trip, like I mentioned here at the top of the podcast. And the first night of a back-to-back, they'll play LeBron and the Lakers tomorrow night. Assuming LeBron plays, he's listed as questionable, but he'll play. Don't worry. As he goes for that scoring record. For that reason, the Thunder are on TNT again. But, I mean, you got to give the Thunder some credit as well. This is their second TNT game now that they've been slotted into, I guess would be the term there. Like I said, most of that's due to LeBron, the scoring record, but obviously they know it's going to be a pretty fun opponent and a fun game to stream as well, and just more national media attention for OKC. So hopefully they come out a little better than they did tonight. A fun stat from Joe Masato of the Oklahoman. Coming into tonight, the Thunder had lost 7 straight to the Warriors, with its last win being November 25th, 2019. Yes, that is now 8 straight to the Warriors if you include tonight. But that last win against the Thunder in 2019, Schroeder led the Thunder with 22 points. Pretty crazy to think about how long ago that was, how long ago that seems, how long it's been. The Warriors have really had our number ever since then. A lot of that's due to the repositioning of the team, tearing it down and starting to build it back up. But regardless, kind of a fun little stat there, or maybe a not so fun stat there that Joe had. No Steph tonight, which makes the loss honestly even worse, as he has honestly, I wasn't even going to even bother trying to name it. He has some injury to multiple ligaments in his leg that will sideline him for at least a month. And thankfully, it doesn't seem to be quite as serious as initially thought. I was seeing like 4 to 6 week timelines, 6 to 8 week timelines, but listening to some of our friends over at the Light Years podcast and other Blue Wire podcasts, as well as some actually like pretty reputable sports doctors, seems like it'll be closer to maybe around the 1 month range, which would be obviously great for the Warriors, but just good for the NBA as well with Steph playing. However, that does, in the meantime, open up a potential opportunity for Shea to start an All-Star game. Fingers crossed, we'll see what happens. And then another one I wanted to mention, and this kind of goes into the overall theme of the game, but the Warriors really, really wanted this one due to the standings. We'll get into standings here in a bit, but they're going to need every win they can, especially with Steph out, with the West being so tight, especially if the Warriors, if they're obviously are wanting to make the playoffs. So they really needed a game like tonight, and they showed it. Meanwhile, OKC did not. The starters for OKC, Shea, Wiggins, J-Dub, Giddey, and J. Will got the start. I thought J. Will looked pretty good overall. But yeah, he gets to start again after a pretty good stretch of games. First quarter, quick 9-2 run for OKC to start things. Dub drove and scored over Tre Mann, which was awesome to see just from the very beginning. J. Will hits a 3. Boom. Wiggins had a great backdoor cut, per usual, and Shea did Shea things. A similar aggressive fast start, I thought, to how the Thunder started the Rockets game on Saturday. And so, like I said, very different to a week ago against the Warriors, but they came out slow and then finished strong. Tonight, they came out really strong. Honestly, it was kind of weird. It was like kind of both Rockets games from the past week in one game, where except this time the Thunder started out really strong, like they did that second game against the Rockets, and ended up playing really the last 3 quarters, but mainly the second half, more like they did, a little more apathetic, lackadaisical, like they did there in that first Rockets game. So Klay started to get it going early, but Shea followed. It was pretty fun. He had 2 elite mid-range jumpers where he created separation, stopped on a dime, and knocked down the 2 pull-ups, which is just an elite skill that he has, that he's continued to hone in. And one was that baseline shot that he's been going to. We've seen it in game winner form. We also have been seeing him go to it more and more earlier and earlier in the game, which has been kind of interesting to follow throughout the season. And then one was just a mid-range shot right under the free throw line that he basically had 2 defenders that, he stopped on a dime, did a little step back, and both of them kind of went flying. So that was cool to see as well. Muscala was the first up for OKC, followed by Isaiah Joe. Wiggins really got it going early, like I mentioned at the top of the podcast. It's one of my takeaways, and it was kind of an exclamation point there in the first quarter for Wiggins was when he had an and one with about 4 left in the quarter, and that got him up to 10 points, tied for Shea as a Thunder's leading scorer, and just a great first quarter for Aaron Wiggins. 18 of the Thunder's 29 points came in the paint. That just shows their aggressiveness and how them playing to their style of basketball. Meanwhile, Klay Thompson continues to just go absolutely insane. 18 points on 7 of 8 shooting, 4 from 3. This was with still like 3 minutes, I think, left in the first quarter. Tre Mann came in. Mentioned Tre Mann, knocked down 2 threes, which was huge. And it kind of set the tone for his game. And then still, regardless of Klay's explosion, Thunder led 37-31 at the end of the first quarter. I thought this stat was really interesting when I pulled this up. Thunder shot 14-25 from the field, 56%, which is obviously great, while the Warriors shot 13-24 from the field, but they both shot 4 of 9 from 3. And when you take into consideration Klay's explosion and his, I mean, he essentially accounted for all of those, I think, Warriors 3-point shots. Actually, yes, he did. He was like 4 or 5 from 3. The Warriors were 4 of 9 as a team. The Thunder were still ahead even after all of that, and they matched the Warriors in 3-point shooting. And then the second quarter happens, and Tre Mann came out firing again like he did in the first quarter, had his 9th shot attempt with 8 minutes still left in the second. That's a good thing. I love seeing it. The Thunder really needed it at that point, especially with the second unit and Shea being out, and it was great to see. However, Klay kept it going. With 3:26 left in the half, he was 6 of 7 from 3, 24 points, just absolutely absurd. Really poor defense on Klay didn't help. That's not to discount what Klay was doing. It may not have really even mattered, but the Thunder kept hedging on screens, then dropping back, giving Klay plenty of space. That's something I kind of want to get into later here in the podcast. The Thunder came out super aggressive again this game, but they're ending the half not nearly as sharp. This is a note that I had. Turnovers, missed jumpers, pretty poor defensive effort. It just kind of went downhill from here. Klay drilled another 3 at the buzzer to get 27 points. Warriors led 60-53 at half, 18-7 run to end the half for Golden State. Thunder dropped 6 of 19 from 3 and 20-49 overall, while the Warriors stayed above 50% and 11-25 from 3. Just an absurd offensive performance from Golden State after a historical performance, offensive performance from OKC a couple nights earlier on Saturday night back in OKC. Really bad half from Giddey. Just a note, he ended up having a decent second half, but bad half from Giddey. He looked rushed, flustered, was 0-4 from the 4, missed some open floaters. It stood out to me to have that note there. Like I said, he rebounded, no pun intended, in the second half, but first half from him, I think Jacob tweeted this out, one of the worst we've seen from him in a while. Third quarter, Kendrick starts instead of Wiggins. Klay starts where he leaves off, 14-5 run to start the half for Golden State Warriors. Thunder couldn't get settled in offensively. They looked rushed, 4 shots, so it wasn't just Giddey. The whole team looked like that. Shea was barely even getting looks, much less touches. I thought not Aaron, but Andrew Wiggins was playing great defense on him. But at the same time, Shea wasn't really coming to the ball and looking for it. It was a kind of a weird game from Shea. He seemed a bit out of it, but you have to credit Wiggins and the Golden State defensive scheme and team defense kind of taking him out of the game in a way. The Thunder got the lead back down to 12 at one point in the third quarter. It looked like they maybe would have a bit of a chance, but another Warriors barrage of points got it back up to 20, and basically they did not look back. 104-79 after 3 quarters. Warriors outscored the Thunder 60-18 from 3-point range through 3 quarters. And the fourth quarter, just some small notes here. Tre continued to be aggressive and give OKC a tiny resemblance of a spark. Basically, he got it back to within like 20 points, which is sad to say, but that was a tiny spark. Giddey finally got a little more aggressive. Kind of rubbed off, the aggressiveness kind of rubbed off on Giddey, which was great to see. Daignault wisely played Omari, Bays, Lindy Waters in the fourth, with the Thunder having another game tomorrow. Shea set out again in the fourth quarter, just like Saturday, but for a much different reason, the opposite reason. And then Daignault letting these guys ride it out and get minutes was great, because like I said, it gives the main Thunder players, that's a bad way to put it, the guys, the main staples in the rotation, in Daignault's rotation, a little rest there, not having to play a full 48 minutes with another big game tomorrow night, especially a national TV game against the Lakers, LeBron, et cetera. Thunder ended up losing 141-114. Just looking at those shooting splits again, because I think it's pretty significant. The Thunder ended up shooting 48.4% from the floor, which isn't horrendous. Obviously not great. 44 of 91. Meanwhile, the Warriors shot 56 of 97, 57.7% from the field. Looking at threes, Thunder shot 11 of 32, only 34%, while the Warriors shot 26 of 50. 52%. Shooting over 50% from 3 on that amount of attempts is just absolutely like asinine. But you also look at the total field goals attempted. The Thunder had 91. The Warriors had 97. However, only 32 of those were 3-point shots, at 3-point attempts for the Thunder, to the Warriors 50. Almost over half of their shots were from 3. And that's just playing right into the style of basketball that make the Warriors so dangerous and why they're still so good. Even as their stars continue to age, even without one of their stars like Steph. So just something to note there as we kind of get into some of our bigger over all themes. So kind of getting into some of those bigger, deeper points, like I just mentioned there, we've got, I had 5 big takeaways. And you all have, those of you who have listened for a long time, we all do some of these differently. We break them down differently. Like I said, it's late. And it's first night of back to back. So I'm going, and it was an absolute beatdown. So I'm going back to an old, reliable, a fun, but easy way to kind of break these down, in my opinion. The positives and the negatives. The negatives and the positives, as I call it. Because I always like to end on the positives, even on a night, especially on a night like tonight. And believe it or not, there were 2 really kind of 3 positives that I want to touch on to round these out. However, maybe the 2 biggest in terms of the biggest themes of the game were negatives. And we're going to go ahead and jump into them here. The first of these is, like I mentioned, what did the Thunder ever do to hurt Klay Thompson? Klay goes off on OKC. A tale as old as time. Is insane. It really is at this point. Tonight, 42 points, 15 of 22 from the field, 12 of 16 from 3. He only had three made shots that weren't, or that were within the 3-point line. 95%, 95% true shooting percentage. 95.5 true shooting percentage. I think that's the way to say it there. Per Shea Young, NBA, a friend of the podcast, this was the 3rd most efficient 40 piece of Klay's career, which is insane to think about. And I did not do the deep research on this, but I would assume that one of those other 2 probably came against OKC as well. And I'm thinking about Game 6. Just it kind of puts into perspective how amazing Klay is, but not only that, just how special what he did tonight was against the Thunder. Just absolutely crazy. And also the fact that he could have a more efficient night than a 95 true shooting percentage. Like, it's just 2 games with a higher true shooting percentage than what he had tonight. It's pretty wild to think about. And maybe it wasn't from a true shooting percentage standpoint. It could have just been the efficiency in general. 15, 22 from the floor. I mean, he has had some games, 2 games, I think, where he only missed like 2 shots or something. But regardless, just puts that into perspective how special Klay was tonight and how the Thunder, no matter what they did, I didn't think the defense was great by any means, but it didn't really matter. Speaking of that, the Thunder missed Lu, and sorry, this is still under my negative of what did the Thunder ever do to hurt Klay Thompson. Obviously, the Thunder missed Lu, but not sure Lu could have even stopped Klay when he's in this kind of a trance. He can help prevent it from starting, though, which I think is important to think about. If a player like Lu is guarding Klay to begin with, it doesn't give Klay the opportunity to get hot so early, and thus leading to this avalanche that was Klay Thompson tonight. Now, my next takeaway and my next big negative kind of ties into 2 bigger overall themes. One I've noticed this season, one for the game as a whole. But the next big negative I have here is the 3-point discrepancy. I already touched on it some, but the Warriors shot 26 of 50, 52% from 3 to the Thunder's 11 of 32, or 34.4% from 3. As my guy Justin would say, I was told there would be no math. But as my guy Jacob says, simple math here. The Warriors took nearly 20 more threes than the Thunder and made almost as many as the Thunder attempted. That'll do it. Also, very similar stat. If you go back and listen to my postgame I did against the Warriors a week ago, very similar as well. It's just the Warrior style basketball. The Thunder played right into it tonight, especially there in the last 3 quarters. This goes into a couple bigger overall things, like I mentioned, but just to simply note them here, not to list them out separately or anything, but the Thunder continue to struggle with how they guard the 3-point shot. Depending on the personnel they have in, you'll see them switch sometimes, but more often than not, what you'll see is what they did tonight, which is they'll hedge or shadow on ball screens, and then the defender drops back. And my dad's mentioned this all season. It's something he's noticed that's kind of been driving him crazy. He's been reaching out to me and my brother all season about it. Jacob mentioned it tonight, but specifically tonight, playing a player like Jay Will, who's been playing really well as a whole overall, but he's not the best defender at this point in his career, which is fine. He's young, right? But just to use that as an example, playing him allowed the Warriors to basically attack him all game by bringing his man up for a ball screen, knowing J.O. would sit back. He would not switch, and this gives the shooter plenty of room to fire off a 3. So the guard, the other Thunder defender, would hedge on that screen, or J.O. would hedge, try to give the guard enough time to recover. J.O. would drop back, but in the meantime, when you have a shooter as quick as Klay Thompson. Steph didn't play, but obviously Jordan Poole falls in that same category. And even other players like Dante DiVincenzo I don't know. I just went blank on who am I thinking of? I'm gonna look this up. Yeah, it is Dante. Getting confused on where everybody's at these days in the NBA with all the different player movement. But yeah, Dante, he was even 4 of 8 from 3. That was one that stood out to me. Michael Green was another one. Giving those guys even just a little bit of space. And some of those, like those last time I mentioned, aren't even the quickest releases necessarily. That allowed the Warriors to be able to get off just really any 3-point attempts that they wanted, which led to that just absurd stat that I mentioned about how many threes that they attempted, and they were over 50% from 3. Player, like I said, played right into the Warriors' strengths, and this is where, like mentioning Lu earlier, having Lu to fight through those screens helps tremendously. Such a strong point of attack defender like Lu, but also just having him to be able to get around or get through, more importantly, those screens kind of makes up for that Thunder weakness, because then you don't have the guy shadowing or hedging. You don't have to worry about a guy like Jay Will, who's slow to be able to get up on a defender or just stays back altogether. That allows a player like Jay Will to be able to stay back because you still have Lu in the face of the defender. But also a better big defender like JRE, who is more versatile on the perimeter. We talked a lot about that last season, how he's able to guard smaller guards on the perimeter. Having him healthy again is going to help with that tremendously. We know he's been playing with the Blue. He's been reassigned to the Thunder. I didn't see him on the bench. Doesn't mean he wasn't there tonight. So we might not see him on this road trip. It might not be until maybe that first game, that last game before the All-Star break back home. Excuse me. But anyways, he's getting closer. So having a player like JRE helps. And then, yes, like we all have talked about all season long, having a longer, more versatile defender like Chet helps so much more when playing a team like the Warriors, for all the reasons I mentioned above. And then the other big overall theme that I mentioned that I think this 3-point discrepancy thing from tonight tied into is that the Thunder got away from playing their strengths and to their strengths and their identity after that first quarter and played to the Warriors' strengths. They were rushing past it, playing basically the style that the Warriors wanted them to. Like I said, leading to those 3-point shots for the Warriors, but also the Warriors were sagging off, allowing the Thunder players to take open shots. And not only that, but they were basically making sure players like Shea didn't touch the ball. They were I'm trying to think how to explain this, but essentially they were kind of controlling where the ball went, and so you had players less efficient from 3. For the Thunder. Sorry, like I said, it's late. And I hear a baby in the background. Scrambled thoughts. All that to say, the Warriors really kind of controlled how the Thunder played. Is what I'm trying to get at there in the second half specifically. So that's just kind of a bigger overall theme, I think, that kind of goes into the 3-point discrepancy there. Now, like I said, there are some positives, believe it or not. Aggressive Tre 1K. We talked a little bit about him already. More aggressive, the most aggressive we've seen from Tre in a long time, which is great to see. He had more shot attempts the most shot attempts on the team at 17, one more than Shea. Granted, Shea didn't play the fourth quarter. That just kind of shows you, like I said, how Tre just came out firing. He played with confidence even when the shot wasn't falling at first. We have seen in the past where Tre will kind of go to that step back 3 a couple times, almost the first 2, and then he just kind of shies away. That wasn't the case tonight. He kept shooting. It helps that he made his first 2 threes, I believe. One of them was a catch and shoot 3, which I love seeing. Tre's going to need to get better and better at that. We know how elite he is at creating space and being able to hit that step back 3, but being able to play off guys like Giddey, like Shea, like J-Dub, he's going to need to be able to knock down catch and shoot 3-point attempts, which he was doing. Anyways, there were stretches tonight where he wasn't making shots, where he'd have 2 or 3 missed shots, and he kept firing regardless. And look, sometimes that can be to the detriment of a team. We've talked about players in the past in OKC, one of them on the roster currently, where that has not been a good thing. But the coaches have talked more and more about how they want to see more of that from Tre, and that's what we saw tonight. And again, it was to the benefit of the team. So Tre Mann was a bright spot for me. And also, it was infectious. We saw it rub off on Giddey there in the third quarter, I believe, when they were playing together. That kind of got Giddey out of his funk a little bit, seeing Tre be aggressive. And we kind of saw them, dapping each other up, trying to get fired up there in the third quarter. It didn't lead to anything necessarily. Didn't lead to much of a run. But it also wore off on Giddey as well, which is something to note. I mentioned Lu Dort. The defensive significance of Lu Dort is kind of cheating here, including this as a positive for tonight's game. But one thing that tonight did show, and a lot of these games have shown since Lu's been out with that hamstring tweak that he had, we really missed Lu Dort and his impact on the defensive end of the floor. But that's a good thing, right? Like it shows the impact that Lu does have, and especially since this isn't like a long-term injury, we'll hopefully have him back. He's on the road trip. Like I said, I don't think JRE is, but Lu was. I saw him tonight. Maybe he does play tomorrow. We'll see. But his strong point of attack defense, his ability to play through screens, like I mentioned, limiting the weaknesses of OKC, and just the defensive intensity that he brings, the leadership he brings on that floor each and every night. Having a player like Lu tonight, especially with Steph out and having him on Klay, I think this game looks very, very different. That's easy to say in hindsight, right? But I believe it full-heartedly. So defensive impact of Lu Dort, maybe not positive for tonight. It kind of shows that even if Lu doesn't necessarily fit this mold of players that Presti is assembling here for this team, we can see the role that Lu's carved out and how he can fit with this team long term. And that's not to say that he won't be traded down the line or J-Dub won't, take over his starting spot someday or whatever the case may be. But regardless, for the time being, Lu has a significant impact on this team, especially on the defensive end of the floor. And then finally, my last positive, Aaron Wiggins, really solid game from him tonight. All things considered, he had 19 points. Almost chose him as my player of the game, said Tre, but 19 points, 2 rebounds, 1 assist, 8 of 10 from the floor, 2 of 3 from 3, which is huge. All in 25 minutes, 2 steals. Thought he was great on both ends of the court as a whole. He had a Klay assignment for a lot of the game, and you can only do so much in those situations, but especially offensively. And one thing that really stood out to me is something I mentioned there when I was in the first quarter breakdown, is he's such a great cutter, especially backdoor. But there were a couple cuts that he had that were just, so timely. It's so reminiscent of Andre Robertson, currently OKC Blue player Andre Robertson, and his ability to cut. We talked about Dre not being able to space the floor for the Thunder, but he did provide some floor spacing, not because he could hit a three-point shot, but because of his ability to cut and move off ball. And we're seeing that more and more from Aaron Wiggins at a pretty elite level. Like some of the cuts he had were really impressive tonight, which led to an incredible pass from Shea there in the first quarter, as well as multiple opportunities from, Giddey's looking for him, Shea's looking for him, J-Dub's looking for him. It just creates a really great offense. And even if the shot's not there, if he has it's drawing a defender or sometimes 2 defenders over to try and protect the rim, block that shot, which leads to other opportunities to kick the ball back out for an open 3-point shot, or to generate offense by, kicking back out, moving the ball, at least to other open shots and other opportunities for the offense. So all that to say, a really underrated thing that I think Wiggins brings, that's becoming more and more streamlined and mainstream. It's the word I'm looking for there. And that was just kind of really on display tonight for Aaron Wiggins. And I think kind of has been when he's been thrust in the starting position here over the last handful of games with Lu Dort being out. So I think that's all I have in terms of my positives and big takeaways. Like I mentioned, my player of the game was Tre Mann. I loved his aggressiveness. All the reasons I mentioned earlier. 18 points, 8 of 17 from the floor, only 2 of 6 from 3. Here's the thing. And somebody tweeted me about this from the account. I apologize for not giving you all credit, whoever it was. But they said, they love seeing his aggressiveness. They feel like this is more of a trend. This wasn't just a one-off thing with this game, which I agree with. And that this person said that they thought we were due for a big Tre, quote-unquote, breakout game. And I agree. You look at that number, 2 of 6 from 3. He's still at 18 points, 8 of 17 from the floor. If he makes 3 more of those 3-point attempts, or he even takes more 3-point attempts, less 2-point attempts, and he has that shot going, like we could see a 30-piece from Tre Mann, which seems a little aggressive right now. But I don't think it's, I mentioned here a month back about how Tre Mann could potentially be a casualty of the rebuild. What I mean by that is not that he's going to be a bust in the NBA, but that he could be a player that has to go elsewhere during this rebuild and then flourishes. But if he plays like he did tonight and he becomes a little more efficient, that won't even be a question. Anyways, it'll be interesting to continue to monitor. Tre Mann was my player of the game. As I mentioned above, the Thunder have a back-to-back tomorrow against the Los Angeles Lakers on TNT. LeBron could break the scoring record. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I think he needs 36 points. So we'll see if he can do it. We'll see if Lu Dort plays tomorrow or not. We'll hopefully see a regardless, a better performance from the Thunder, much better effort as a whole. But regardless, the Thunder will have, or the uncontested will have you covered the entire way. I believe our guy Jacob is breaking down both tomorrow night and then Friday night. The Thunder continue their West Coast trip. They end their West Coast trip with a visit to Portland to visit Dame and the Blazers. So we'll see how that one goes. That'll be, obviously right there after the trade deadline. So it could be a different looking Blazers team. Who knows? Maybe a slightly different looking Thunder team. But like I said, regardless, we'll have you covered for it all. Speaking of that, Jacob and JD Silva are planning to go live during the trade deadline on Thursday. So be sure to tune in there. And like I mentioned, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but the uncontested will have you covered for all of it. So thank you all for tuning in, especially tonight. Super late, but we still had a great showing. It was a blowout, but you all still showed out. Really appreciate you all tuning in. And until tomorrow night, Thunder up.